Welcome to Narcut channel. Friendship is supposed to be a safe space, a place of laughter, support, and trust. But sometimes, what feels like a friendship is something else entirely. It can feel heavy, confusing, and even draining, as if every moment with that person leaves you second-guessing yourself. Today, we're exploring what it's really like to be in a friendship with a narcissist. Not the obvious, loud kind of manipulation, but the subtle pulls, the unspoken competitions, and the invisible betrayals that can leave you wondering if you're the problem. If you've ever felt exhausted after spending time with a friend, if you've ever noticed that their victories seem to matter more than your struggles, or if you've questioned why their support felt conditional, you are not alone. In this video, we'll gently walk through what life looks like in these friendships, share a real story of how they unravel, and explore the psychology behind narcissistic traits. And finally, we'll contrast what unhealthy friendships look like compared to the nourishing, genuine connections that everyone deserves. So, let us begin with the daily life of being friends with a narcissist. The small details that add up, the patterns that weigh on your heart. Imagine this. You're meeting a friend for coffee. On the surface, it looks like any other friendship, laughs, stories, updates. But under the surface, there's something else. A tension you can't name. Your friend starts by telling you about their latest success, and you smile, you listen, you celebrate them. But when you share your own small victories, something, you were genuinely excited about the air shifts. Their smile stiffens, their eyes glaze over, or they quickly redirect the conversation back to themselves. Somehow, the spotlight always finds its way back to them. Over time, these moments pile up. Every hangout becomes a performance where you are the audience and they are the star. And when you try to step into the light, even briefly, there's a subtle reminder. This friendship revolves around me. Drama is never far away either. A misunderstanding, a vague social media post, or even silence can suddenly become a storm. You may find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, just to keep the peace. The weight of silence, the sharp edge of sarcasm, or the cold shoulder after you say no to the mitt, all becomes part of the routine. And then there's the competition. It might be hidden behind jokes or playful remarks, but it's there. You mention you're tired from work, and somehow they're more tired. You say you're proud of something you achieved, and suddenly they have a bigger story to tell. It's not support, it's a silent race where your role is to lose. Friendship with a narcissist often feels like quicksand. At first, it seems solid, even exciting, but slowly, you realize you're sinking. The more you give, the more they take. The more you try to explain yourself, the more confused you become. And yet, there's always just enough warmth to keep you questioning. A kind word, a thoughtful gesture, a moment of laughter that makes you think. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe I'm overthinking. But deep down, you feel the truth. This isn't friendship. It's a cycle of drama, competition, and betrayal wrapped in the disguise of closeness. Let me share with you the story of Emily, not her real name, but a composite of many stories survivors have shared. Maybe some of her experience will sound familiar to you. Emily met Sophie in college. From the beginning, Sophie was magnetic. She was funny, bold, and seemed to have endless energy. Whenever Sophie walked into a room, people noticed. Emily felt lucky to be her friend. Sophie made her feel special, choosing her as a confidant, inviting her into her inner circle. At first, the friendship was Sophie would send Emily long messages late at night, talking about her dreams, her frustrations, her vision for the future. Emily listened, encouraged, and felt honored to be the chosen friend. And in return, Sophie sometimes gave Emily advice or offered compliments that felt larger than life. But slowly, little cracks began to show. When Emily shared good news like landing a competitive internship, Sophie's congratulations were followed by stories of her own achievements. Emily noticed that her victories rarely stood alone. They always had to be matched or overshadowed by Sophie's. If Emily talked about feeling stressed, Sophie's stress was greater. If Emily struggled, Sophie somehow struggled more. It wasn't obvious at first, but over time, Emily realized that her own feelings rarely had space. Then came the subtle digs. If Emily wore something new, Sophie might say, "Oh, that's cute. I had something like that last year." If Emily expressed pride in a project, Sophie would smile but add, "Well, it's good practice. You'll do better next time." The words weren't cruel, but the impact was sharp. Emily started to second-guess herself, wondering if she was overreacting, wondering if Sophie was really just being honest. There were moments of closeness too, of course. Nights filled with laughter, inside jokes, and memories that felt unbreakable. That's what made it so confusing. How could a friend who made her laugh until her stomach hurt also leave her feeling so small, so invisible? As the years went on, the pattern deepened. Whenever Emily needed support, when her grandfather passed away, when she was facing challenges at work, Sophie was strangely distant. She would offer words, but quickly pivot to her own issues. Emily began to notice that the friendship only felt alive when Sophie was in the spotlight. The turning point came during a birthday celebration. Emily had planned a small gathering, excited to finally have the focus on her for once. But midway through the evening, Sophie began telling a dramatic story about a crisis at her job. Everyone's attention shifted. The party slowly became about Sophie's struggles, Sophie's emotions, Sophie's need for reassurance. Emily sat there, smiling weakly. But inside, she felt a mix of sadness and clarity. It hit her. This wasn't the first time Sophie had hijacked her moment. Birthdays, graduations, even simple hangouts. Somehow, Sophie always found a way to redirect the energy. Later that night, when Emily gently brought it up, Sophie turned cold. She accused Emily of being ungrateful, of being jealous, of not understanding what true friendship meant. Emily found herself apologizing, her voice shaky, trying to repair the rift. But deep down, she knew something was broken. Over the next months, Emily tried to step back. She answered texts less frequently, set boundaries around her time, and Sophie noticed. The more Emily pulled away, the more Sophie tried to reel her back in through guilt, through sudden affection, through reminders of all the good times they'd shared. Emily felt trapped between loyalty and self-preservation. What finally freed her was not a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet realization. She always felt worse after seeing Sophie. Not sometimes, not occasionally, but always. The energy she poured into the friendship was never returned. Her voice was always smaller. Her needs were always secondary. And that's when she made the choice to let go. It wasn't easy, it wasn't clean, but slowly, with distance, Emily felt lighter. She began to rediscover friendships where support was mutual, where laughter was easy, and where trust wasn't conditional. Emily's story isn't rare. Many people who've been close to narcissistic friends describe this same cycle. The charm at the beginning, the slow drip of competition, the subtle push, the endless drama, and the crushing realization that the friendship was never truly about mutual care. And if you've experienced something like this, you might recognize the push and pull, the warmth that keeps you hoping, and the coldness that leaves you doubting yourself. That's the tricky part of narcissistic friendships. They're not always explosive or overtly cruel. Sometimes they're wrapped in laughter, fun, and intimacy. But beneath that, there's an imbalance, a steady erosion of your confidence, a quiet pressure to keep them happy, and a nagging feeling that your needs don't really matter. You might wonder, was it me? Did I expect too much? Did I misinterpret? These questions are normal. Survivors of narcissistic friendships often blame themselves long before they see the pattern. And that self-doubt is exactly what keeps the cycle going. Emily's journey shows something important. The moment of clarity usually comes, not during the highs, but during the lows, when you realize that joy with them always costs you something, and support is never truly mutual. And if you've had a friend like Sophie, you know this truth. walking away can feel like grief. Because you're not just losing the toxic parts, you're losing the memories, the inside jokes, the moments that felt real. But with time, you also gain something. You gain your voice back. You gain your peace. You gain the chance to form friendships that are equal, balanced, and nourishing. So, as we hold Emily's story in mind, let's shift into the psychology behind these dynamics. Why do narcissistic friends act this way? What drives the constant need for competition, the subtle betrayals, and the inability to truly celebrate someone else's joy? That's where we'll go next. The Psychology Deep Dive. When we look beneath the surface of a narcissistic friendship, what we find is a pattern. It's not random, and it's not about you being too sensitive or too demanding. These dynamics follow a psychological blueprint that many people around the world have experienced. By understanding the psychology, you begin to see that it was never truly about your worth. It was about their needs, their insecurities, and their patterns. Let's take this step by step. 1. The attraction phase. Charm and magnetism. Almost every story about narcissistic friendships begins with one word: charm. Narcissists often know how to draw people in. They may appear confident, funny, adventurous, or deeply interested in you. In the beginning, they can make you feel chosen. They shower you with attention, and they notice small details that make you feel special. This stage isn't an accident. Psychologists sometimes call it love bombing, even in friendships. It's a way of securing your loyalty early on. They create a sense of closeness and intensity, very quickly making you feel like you've found a soulmate in friendship form. But here's the catch. That charm is conditional. It's not rooted in genuine curiosity about you. It's a tool to establish the relationship on their terms. Once the bond feels secure, the balance begins to shift. 2. The subtle competition. Why they can't truly share the spotlight. One of the hallmarks of narcissistic friendships is competition. Why does this happen? At its core, narcissism is driven by a fragile sense of self. Despite appearing confident, many narcissists struggle with deep insecurities. They rely on external validation to feel stable. When you succeed, instead of celebrating with you, they may feel threatened. Your success reminds them of their own vulnerabilities. This is why you might notice little patterns. They always one-up your stories. They downplay your achievements with sarcasm or faint praise. They shift the conversation back to themselves when you share something meaningful. It's not that day. Don't he care about you at all? That their need to protect their own fragile self-image outweighs their ability to celebrate you. Over time, this constant competition leaves you feeling unseen. You start shrinking your own stories, minimizing your own wins, just to avoid the subtle sting of their reactions. 3. The drama cycle. Y.com never lasts. If you've been friends with a narcissist, you know this truth. Peace never lasts. There is always drama, arguments, misunderstandings, sudden coldness, or unexplained tension. Why? Because narcissistic individuals often struggle with emotional regulation. Calm feels boring to them. They thrive on intensity, whether it's excitement or conflict. Drama keeps them at the center of attention, ensuring that the relationship revolves around their emotions. This drama cycle often follows a predictable rhythm. Tension builds. They might withdraw, act cold, or drop vague hints that something is wrong. Conflict erupts. A small issue becomes a big fight, or they accuse you of not being supportive enough. Reconciliation happens. They offer just enough warmth, affection, or humor to draw you back in. The cycle resets. Calm returns, briefly, until the next storm. Living in this cycle is exhausting. You never quite relax because you don't know when the next wave will hit. This constant uncertainty is what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, and it's one of the strongest ways to keep someone hooked in a toxic relationship. 4. The mask. Public versus private personas. Another confusing element is how different they can seem in public versus in private. In public, your narcissistic friend might be charismatic, generous, and adored by others. They may go out of their way to appear kind, funny, or supportive. People around them might say, "You're so lucky to have them as a friend." But behind closed doors, the dynamic changes. The sarcasm, the cold shoulders, the competitiveness, and the subtle digs become clear. This split is part of what makes it so hard to explain your experience to others. You might try to share your concerns, only to be met with disbelief. "But she's so nice," or "He's always been a great friend to me." That's because narcissists are skilled at managing their image. They know how to wear the right mask in public. But the people closest to them, friends, partners, family, see the cracks beneath the surface. 5. Gaslighting and self-doubt. Gaslighting is another tool often present in narcissistic friendships. Though sometimes in subtle ways. When you bring up an issue, they may say, "You're overreacting. I was just joking. You're too sensitive. Why are you always making me the bad guy?" Over time, these responses train you to doubt your own perceptions. You start to question your memory, your feelings, and your judgment. Gaslighting doesn't have to be dramatic to be effective. Even small, repeated dismissals can wear down your confidence. The result is that you stay stuck, always wondering if the problem is actually you. 6. Why? It feels addictive. The psychology of intermittent validation. One of the hardest parts to understand is why it feels so difficult to walk away. If the friendship is so draining, why can't you just leave? The answer lies in psychology. When someone gives you unpredictable rewards, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, your brain actually bonds more strongly. It's the same principle that makes slot machines addictive. You never know when the good side of your friend will appear, so you keep holding on, hoping that this time they'll show the kindness you crave. This unpredictability keeps you hooked far longer than consistent cruelty ever could. Because with consistent cruelty, you'd leave. With inconsistency, you cling to the hope. 7. The devaluation phase. When you stop being useful. At some point, many narcissistic friendships reach what psychologists call the devaluation phase. This is when the warmth, the charm, and the closeness fade almost completely. Your friend may become openly critical, dismissive, or distant. They might seek out new friends to admire them, leaving you feeling discarded. For the person on the receiving end, this is painful. You may feel abandoned, confused, and desperate to win back their affection. But it's important to remember, this shift isn't about you losing value. It's about their endless search for validation and novelty. 8. The core traits driving these patterns. So, what exactly drives this behavior? Psychologists outline a few key traits of narcissistic personality disorder and subclinical narcissism. Grandiosity, an exaggerated sense of importance, need for admiration, a constant craving for validation and attention, lack of empathy, difficulty truly understanding or caring about others' feelings, exploitation, using others to meet their own needs, fragile self-esteem. Despite the outward confidence, their inner world is shaky. When you combine these traits in a friendship, the result is imbalance. You give, they take. You listen, they talk. You celebrate them, they minimize you. 9. Why survivors often blame themselves. One of the deepest wounds left by narcissistic friendships is self-blame. Survivors often ask, "Why did I put up with it for so long? Why didn't I see the signs earlier?" The truth is, these dynamics are designed to keep you doubting yourself. Narcissists know how to mix charm with criticism, warmth with coldness. They know how to offer just enough affection to keep you hoping. If you stayed, it's not because you were weak. It's because you were human. You wanted connection, loyalty, and trust, things every person deserves in a friendship. 10. The path to healing. Gentle reflections, understanding the psychology, is the first step toward healing. When you see the patterns clearly, you can stop blaming yourself. You can begin to name what happened. It wasn't just a rough friendship. It was a dynamic rooted in narcissism. Healing often involves validation, knowing you're not alone, and not imagining things. Boundaries, learning to protect your time, energy, and emotions. Healthy models, experiencing friendships where mutual care exists. Self-compassion, allowing yourself to grieve, to rest, and to grow. So when you think back on that friend who always made you feel smaller, remember this. It wasn't about you not being enough. It was about them never being able to feel enough and trying to fill that emptiness through you. Understanding the psychology behind these patterns doesn't erase the pain, but it does shine a light on the truth. And truth, gently spoken, is what begins to set you free. Now that we've explored the psychology behind narcissistic friendships, let's move into our final segment. Comparing the contrast. What does a healthy, balanced friendship actually look like, and how does it differ from the toxic, narcissistic version? Because sometimes the best way to understand what ISNT healthy is to hold it side by side with what truly is. As we come to the final part of our reflection, let's pause for a moment. You've heard what daily life with a narcissistic friend feels like. You've walked through the story of Emily, and you've learned about the psychological patterns that drive these dynamics. But now, let's shift the perspective, because sometimes the best way to recognize what is unhealthy is to place it side by side with what is healthy. The weight versus the lightness. Friendship with a narcissist often feels like carrying a weight. You leave conversations drained, second-guessing, or quietly hurting. Even joyful moments feel shadowed by competition or tension. A healthy friendship feels different. It feels light. Not that life is always easy, but even in struggles, there's ease. You leave conversations with more energy, not less. You feel understood, supported, and free to be yourself without editing your words or dimming your light. Conditional versus unconditional support in a narcissistic friendship. Support is conditional. Your friend might be there when it benefits them or when they can still stay in the spotlight. If you need too much, if your joy threatens theirs, if your pain requires empathies they may vanish, minimize, or redirect. In a healthy friendship, support flows both ways. Your happiness brings them happiness. Your struggles are met with care, not comparison. The support isn't measured by convenience. It's rooted in genuine concern for you as a whole person. Competition versus celebration. This contrast is one of the clearest. With a narcissistic friend, your successes often feel like threats to them. Your good news may be downplayed, overshadowed, or even ignored. Deep down, you learn to hide your wins, to play small, to protect the friendship from jealousy. With a healthy friend, your success is their success. They cheer for you with no hidden agenda. They're excited because they care about you, not because it reflects on them. And when the roles are reversed, you do the same for them. Celebration flows freely in both directions. Drama versus stability. Narcissistic friendships are rarely calm for long. There's always a storm brewing. Misunderstandings, silences, accusations. Drama becomes the rhythm of the relationship. Healthy friendships, on the other hand, are stable. Conflict may still arise. No friendship is perfect, but it's handled with respect, and resolution.com is the baseline, not the exception. Walking on eggshells versus feeling safe. Perhaps the most painful contrast is this. With a narcissistic friend, you often feel like you're walking on eggshells. You monitor your words, your tone, even your successes, just to avoid triggering jealousy, withdrawal, or criticism. In a healthy friendship, you feel safe. You can be messy, vulnerable, imperfect, and still be accepted. You don't have to shrink to fit. You don't have to fear that your joy or sadness will push them away. Safety is the foundation, not a fragile condition. Masks versus authenticity. A narcissistic friend may show one face in public charming, generous, adored, another in private, dismissive, competitive, or cold. This split leaves you feeling confused and isolated. A healthy friend is consistent. They don't need masks because authenticity is their nature. Who they are with others is who they are with you. And in that consistency, trust grows. The healing, reflection, when you put these contrasts side by side, something becomes clear. True friendship is not meant to drain you. It's meant to sustain you. If you've lived through the weight of narcissistic friendships, the contrast can feel almost startling. You might find yourself waiting for the competition, the sarcasm, the betrayal only to realize in healthy relationships, it doesn't come. Instead, there is laughter, trust, and a steady presence that doesn't require you to prove your worth. Closing words. So, if you've ever wondered why it felt so heavy to be friends with a narcissist, remember this. It wasn't because you were too demanding. It wasn't because you expected too much. It was because what you were experiencing was never true friendship at all. True friendship doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't punish you for shining. It doesn't make you feel invisible in your own story. Instead, it's built on mutual respect, shared joy, and unconditional care. It feels calm. It feels safe. It feels like home. Take a deep breath. You've walked through the shadows of what narcissistic friendships can be. You've learned how they operate, why they hurt, and how they differ from the relationships you deserve. Now, let yourself rest in this truth. You are not alone, and you are not broken. Friendship can be real, supportive, and healing. And in time, you will find, or perhaps you already have found, the kind of connections that bring peace instead of pain. You've learned, you've reflected, and now you can rest, knowing that healthier, lighter friendships are possible, and you are worthy of them. Always.